Thank you so much. How's everyone doing? Good? Hanging in there? Having a good day? I always wanted to do this, you know? When I walked in this room, I had these like visceral reactions of my memories from my university days. And it was like, oh God, I still have this recurring nightmare where I show up to a lecture very similar to this one, and I've not prepared at all. Like it's an exam, and I haven't done the work. It was probably some 8 a.m. class that I never went to. And I wake up in cold sweats because it scares the crap out of me. So it's kind of freaky being here doing this, but glad to be here. Your UX belongs in a museum. Yes, it does. We're going to talk about why. So I'm going to start by asking, who's been to a museum lately? Awesome. That warms my heart. How many of you have been to a museum multiple times this year? How many of you have been to the same museum multiple times this year? Okay, I'm gonna pick victims here. Oh, especially people that go, whoa. Yeah, so tell me why you went to the same museum multiple times this year.
I like to go to the ROM and draw the stuffed animals.
Cool.
I just like to go and kind of in the dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is not nerdy at all. That's awesome. Good for you. Anybody else want to give me an answer as to why they went to a museum multiple times this year? Yes. The dots. Yeah. Cool. Are you a member of the AGO by chance? Yes. And are you a member of the ROM by chance? No, but you should be. Interesting. So you mentioned the ROM, which is a great segue into my next slide, because the ROM was, when I was growing up, was the best. It was the coolest thing and the coolest place for me to go to learn about dinosaurs. I was a huge dinosaur nerd when I was a kid. And all of the other amazing things that are inside the Royal Ontario Museum. And to me, the ROM was the coolest freaking place on earth. Now, whether it was on Miss Wilson's grade 2 school trip where, you know, Joanna J. kissed me for the first time. Thank you, ROM. You know, I have some amazing memories of hopping in the bus and knowing that I was going somewhere that was pretty magical. Or it was like my family would go on these amazing trips across North America, and we'd always stop at the museum, because the museum was a place to like get a bunch of information about that area or that country and learn a bit more. And I have sorry mom there because there's no photo of my mom in this, and I know my mom's the type of woman who's like, oh sure, your father got in the photo, and I didn't get in the photo. So she's also the person when I call her who says, oh, who is this? Who? I don't recognize your voice. Because I don't call her enough. I'm a terrible son. So we would go on these amazing family trips, and the museum or the art gallery was always a really important part of that. And so now that I'm a dad, that's my little guy Oliver, you know, there's this childlike sense of wonder that you can get from a museum. And I'm excited, again, I'm reinvigorated by being able to share that with him. And I have an 8-month-old daughter as well who doesn't know museums yet, but she will. And so it's been really wonderful to see him get excited about these things all over again. Now he's obsessed with dinosaurs. Also got some sweet dance moves. He's obsessed with nature. You can't hear it, but what he's asking me to be right now is a stick. He's like, Daddy, you're a stick. Right? And you'll see him do the stick action. He's like, no, you're a stick. Stop jerking around. See? Stick. Be a stick. He's also obsessed with knights, or something like knights. On the audio, he goes, I'm like, what are you? He goes, I'm a spackawaka. All right, cool. So again, museums can give you this sense of wonder and help you to explore some of those things in a really amazing way. Now, back in the day, my parents wouldn't go to a website. They would get flyers, they would see television ads for places like the ROM or the AGO or, you know, the other various museums, textile museums, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how they knew to take us to those cultural institutions. Or it would be like I mentioned before, when it was a school trip, you know, there would be a school thing going on, and they would sign the release form, and, you know, there you go, you're on the bus. You go to your museum trip. But, you know, where do we learn about museums these days? Anybody want to wager a guess, given the subject of this entire day? The internet, exactly. We learn about museums on the internet. You know, if we want to know more about a cultural institution that we've never been to before, our first place to go and do research is the internet, right? And more often than not, it's here. It's here in our mobile devices. It's on our phones. And especially if you're a tourist in a new city, where do you go first? You're looking on your phone to find out more about what's happening in the area and more about those particular institutions. Now, I'm going to throw a caveat out there because I'm going to mention a lot of museum websites that possibly some people in this room have worked on or are currently working on. There is no malice involved in the opinions that I've formed. It was a broad study of multiple websites. So if you have any problems, let's talk about it over beer after this conversation, okay? So one of the things that I want you to understand is that if I didn't have any previous experiences with some of these institutions, depending on how the websites look or based on my first impressions of those websites, I might not go. You know, as a father, my responsibility is to make an assessment as to whether or not something is a valid exercise or, you know, a fun outing for my kids. And so what I'm doing is it's my responsibility to go and do the research and say, yes, this is going to be fun, they're going to enjoy it, it's going to be appropriate. But going to some of these websites, again, if I didn't have any historical reference for how great they were, I would look at them and go, no, there's not a whole lot there to entice me or excite me into wanting to actually visit that place. Now, I don't know if you caught the video, but there's a little scroll down thing on the Bata Shoe Museum, and you literally scroll down about 40 pixels. And it's one line of text, and it's like, coming soon, and I forget what the word says, but it's like, that was a waste of my time. Why did you make me, just put it in the 300 pixels of white space that's just above the bottom of that screen. You know, so there's an effort that can be made to make those museum websites and those cultural institution websites a lot more enticing and aspirational for the people that are potentially going to be visiting. Now here's a view of the ROM's membership and ticketing information. And the question that we started to talk about at Filament is, you know, is this enough? Maybe it is just enough to have, you know, planning a visit information, hours, cost, etc. And there's enough of an understanding of what that museum offers that they really don't have to inspire action. They don't have to say, you could be so much better if you were here at the museum and here's why. You know, they assume that we already know that and we already feel that, so they're giving us some very tactical information about why I should make that visit. And so is that enough? Now, you're probably wondering a couple of things. First of all, what I want to talk about is how. So a lot of museums are really great at explaining how to do something, how to visit, how to park, how to, you know, buy tickets. But what's often hidden, or in some cases missing completely, is why. Why do I visit a museum? Why is this exhibition exciting? Why is this important? Why should I care about visiting this cultural institution? Now, if time is a new currency, and it's something that I'm sure you've heard of before, this is not a new concept, you know, cultural institutions aren't necessarily immune to the finite measure of somebody's time. And so the same rules apply to them as do nonprofit organizations or organizations in general. And so organizations succeed when they do a couple of things. They provide enlightenment, delight, revelation, or transformation. And what I want to help you understand is the idea of winning time versus collecting time. Now, winning time versus collecting time is simply that as a cultural institution, they provide enlightenment and all of those things that I just talked about in spades once you're there. But are they simply just collecting time, meaning I've already made the decision to go because I know about them, and they're just sort of collecting on that time that they've allocated for me? Or are they winning it? Are they up against other options in my day? Or are they up against other things that I could be doing in order to win that time? So are they enticing me enough to actually go and visit because of something that they did that was a purposeful action rather than just relying on the thing that they've relied on for so long, which is the physical museum itself? Now, I've been a big supporter of the idea in the past, and if you were here last year, you heard me talk about the idea that everything is a user experience. You know, this room that we're in right now is a user experience. Somebody designed it to be optimal for me standing here and you sitting there listening to a lecture. And so if everything is user experience, we really need to focus on both the physical and the digital. And so I want to talk about translating from physical to digital and how we can sort of look at that in a more holistic manner. And it's not just about saying we need to bridge the gap between physical and digital. It's really about blurring the lines between them. and creating a complete experience from the first time that I even hear about the museum to the moment that I'm back home thinking about how great it was and getting an email from you saying, how was your time at the museum? That should be the entire journey, not just when I walk through the doors. So this research that we did at Filament had a lot of burning questions. You'll see these slides come up a few times over the course of this talk. Burning questions. Museums focus on providing the best experience once people arrive, but what about before that? What do they do to create that experience before I get there? Another burning question was, could better UX mean better revenue and a better museum experience overall? And so you're probably wondering how it all came about. How did you guys get on the topic of museum websites in the first place? It seems pretty niche. And it is. And I want to talk about my partner, Steve. Now, little backstory. Steve did a lot of research for this talk, and he was like, you better give me credit for some of this. So what I want you to do is I've created this slide, and I've added Steve's Twitter handle up in the corner. If even two of you can take a picture and @tweet him, that would make his day. And it would let me prove that I actually talked about him in this talk, because he wanted to get some credit for the research that he did. So just everyone mass tweet Steve, so that I can say that I told you about him. In reality, though, what we have at Filament is an initiative called Dream Clients. And every week, every day, every month, there's no set time. We solicit dream clients from our staff. And we say, if there was anybody, take all the constraints away, take all of any sort of inability to work with this person or this company away, who would you want to work with? And so we always get great names like, the Royal Ontario Museum, Lee Valley, WestJet, et cetera, et cetera. And it could be something that's really close and near and dear to their hearts, or it could be something that we've all agreed as a team could use some work for the benefit of society. And so on that list, of course, is the Royal Ontario Museum. And so we started digging in. We're like, maybe we could work with the ROM. That would be awesome. Anybody here from the ROM by any chance? No? Okay, too bad. So that's how we got into the idea of let's look at these museum websites so that we can really dive into this space and understand it a lot better. One of the core values at Filament is curiosity. And I've always been a big proponent of the idea of being more curious than confident. I don't know everything. Surprise, I don't. Neither do you. But what we do have as designers is an insatiable curiosity to find out why and find out more about a specific thing. So for Filament and for me, that curiosity was about, okay, we think the ROM website is okay. I can say that because nobody's here. But what about other websites? What about other museum websites? Are they just as okay? Or are some of them really doing a wonderful job at inspiring that action? Or are some of them doing a really terrible job at inspiring that action? So what we did is we analyzed 12 Canadian websites of museums and cultural institutions. And there's the whole list. I'm not going to read them all off. They were selected for various reasons. Some of them are places that we have experience with. Some of them are completely new. We wanted different subject matters, different sort of breadth of collection, et cetera, but those are the ones that we analyzed. And so what we did is we analyzed them for 4 criteria: navigation, exhibitions, so how they present their exhibitions, memberships and support, and then accessibility. Now, we could have also dove into things like visual impact, aesthetics, how well they're using rich media, et cetera. But these 4 we thought gave us a really good foundation to talk about the user experience of these websites. So we did some casual mind mapping. We took a lot of information and we tracked it all, and we wrote down all the things that we found as we were going through those sites. This is a software called Coggle. I don't know if anybody's used Coggle before. It's not a great name, but it's a great software. And so what happened is there was a lot of patterns that emerged, about navigation, about accessibility, about imagery, about collections, et cetera. But also, like in any good UX study or research, there was a lot of questions. So as we dove deeper, we had more questions about various aspects of these cultural institutions. And one of those questions was, why don't most museums treat the web as an academic medium instead of teaching or taking advantage of the multimedia capabilities of the internet? Why does it focus more on the research behind the collections rather than the exploration of the collection itself? And in a lot of cases, that was what we found. That was what our research was showing. In other cases, is why do most complex actions like buying tickets or buying things from the store take me off-site? They take me to an Eventbrite page or a PayPal experience or somewhere other than the site itself. You know, why don't they keep me in that experience to finish off what I came to do, which might be buying tickets or becoming a member? And so I don't know if you've ever had to go to I'm sure you've gone to PayPal before. And it's like, oh, this museum website's so great. And then you just go to PayPal and it feels like you're in a completely different area, right? Another question that came up was, who's the real audience for exhibitions? You know, based on the way that they present them in certain cases, they're very academic, like I said before. And so the casual user, you know, I'm a father, like I said, you know, other dads like me, I know are not going to the website to read the research around a collection. They're going to find out what the benefit's going to be for their family and what that visit's going to feel like. And so that was one of the questions we had. Now again, I don't have answers to all of these, but this was an ongoing study of ours to figure out why some of these things were the way that they were. Another one is, why is membership the least enticing aspect of most of these sites? It's like, join us, $150, you get a card. Congratulations, you're a member. You know, like that is what most of these museums or cultural institutions need. They require that membership to survive, and yet there's not a lot of effort being put into actually making me want to become a member. All right, so let's break it down. First of all, we're going to talk about navigation. Now, a lot of navigation that we saw appeared to serve the organization rather than the user. And what I mean by that is, in certain cases, there was navigation for boards of directors. There was navigation for a lot of different aspects of the museum. And in certain cases, there's probably a legality and a requirement around that because there's a lot of government funding involved. But we'll dive a little bit deeper into a specific example here. So this is the website for the Montreal Biodome. And I want to point out the fact that there's 4 different types of navigation on this homepage. 4. So we have the navigation in the top right corner, which is all, you know, FAQs and comments, and it's hard to read from here. Then there's the navigation across the top, planning your visit, explore our spaces. Further reading as a global navigate, that was a head scratcher for us. Ooh, the navigation of mystery. Get involved, kids and teachers, and then scientific research. So that's navigation number 3 technically, because we have my account, login, and the French toggle. And then there's all of this other information in the front there. So right away, there's 4 types of navigation, and I'm not really sure where I need to go. They haven't given me the pathway to get into that website efficiently and effectively. By contrast, here is the Textile Museum. Here's a navigation for the Textile Museum. Very streamlined. Plan your visit, exhibitions, programs, collections and research, education, join and support. I think join and support is still a little ambiguous in terms of what I'm being expected to do, but from a navigational perspective, there are clear buckets that I can enter into, and then they can take me further into that site. So in a lot of cases, navigation didn't think about real life. And so again, this is something I really want you to think about whenever you're designing your own products and services, is that web needs to imitate life in a certain regard. There needs to be an experience and an understanding of how somebody would move through that experience in real life and why that's important. And so what I mean by that is this. In terms of the board of directors being on the global navigation, you know, would you show wayfinding signage for the CEO's office in the file room to every visitor that walked into a museum? No, you wouldn't, because that's not important to them at that point in time. You know, would you have a multiple and sometimes contradictory directions to the same exhibit? In our multiple navigation example? No, you wouldn't, because that would piss people off and confuse them a great deal. And also when it comes to mobile, again, I'm going to pick on the ROM for a second here. Sorry, ROM. You know, even when there is a mobile navigation integrated, in the case of the ROM, it's like, well why is it there? What, you know, the expectation that we're used to in terms of navigation is in either the top left or the top right, but they've given you all this stuff ahead of that, and then the navigation is there. And so again, it's like if you were walking into somewhere that you've never been to before, you know, what is somebody going to see first, and what should they see first? And so we had mobile, and then we have like mobile? Now I know there's Science Center folks here in the crowd. You don't need to put your hands up. So we can talk about this after. But come on. In certain cases, the mobile navigation was non-existent, right? It was just not there. Cool. So we can slag it the whole time. This website is shit, right? We can just, yeah, awesome. Good, yes. We'll talk. I'm interested to hear how you feel about the website over a drink or two. It's going to come out to be great. That's awesome. So yeah, in certain cases, it's not there, right? Museums have a multitude of ways people can interact with the exhibits in real life, the wonderful, beautifully designed exhibits in real life. Why not in digital life? Why can't we do it on our mobile devices? Why can't I do it on my laptop? Why can't I start my experience there? So next we looked at exhibitions and content. So when it comes to exhibitions, websites handle this in a number of different ways. You know, museums have the most intriguing, awe-inspiring artifacts and exhibitions, and they're supposed to inspire that awe, but what they kind of inspire is a wah, right? This is from the Gardner Museum, and I love the Gardner Museum. It's wonderful. Like, being there is incredible, and we've taken some ceramic classes with our team. But this is the Yoko Ono exhibit that they're trying to get people to come and see. And it's one photo of the collection and a wall of text. And as we all should know at this point, a wall of text, unless I'm really excited about the Yoko Ono exhibit, I'm not going to read. So how do you get people to be involved in that and get excited about it and want to actually visit this museum or buy tickets in advance? Now here's another example. Now at the ROM, there's an exhibit called the Evidence Room. Who's been to the Evidence Room? It's a really powerful, haunting exhibit which actually reconstructs the key objects that were used in the forensic analysis of architecture at Auschwitz, which was a concentration camp back in the war. And it's amazing, but going to the website, you really don't feel the power of that exhibition. And truthfully, in this case, I'm not sure if you could. But again, it's a single photo and then a wall of description and a wall of text. It doesn't give me any more than that to make me want to visit. And so the way that I look at that is this. Now, if a museum patron or if somebody at a restaurant came and said, I'm really hungry for a great meal, you know, give me your best meal. And then someone dropped a box of frozen taquitos on your plate. Stay with me here. Stay with me. You know, it's like, thank you, I think. What the hell am I going to do with a box of frozen taquitos? Right? And so the way that I look at some of those exhibition representations is exactly that. It's like, I can't really do anything with this except like take the risk that eating these taquitos is going to be a good experience. You know, like taking the risk of actually buying the tickets and going to the museum. So the box of taquitos represents all of the like hopes and dreams and wishes that have gone down the drain because I wasn't given that inspirational, aspirational feeling about that exhibit. Now, a lot of museums rely still on traditional mass advertising, and in a lot of cases it works really well. And they do a pretty good job of creating that sense of an emotional connection with the exhibit. Who saw the advertising for the Viking exhibit that was going on around town? Yeah, I'm actually surprised it's not more. It was everywhere, bus shelters on the side of buses and everywhere. And they did a good job of kind of drawing you into that experience and giving you an understanding of what that might at least look like when you get there. But in a lot of cases on the website, this was just a single image saying, Vikings, buy tickets, you know? And in certain cases, some museums are doing online-only exhibitions, which I think is a really cool, interesting way to show people some of the artwork without having to invest the capital into creating the exhibition physically. But again, in a lot of cases, they fall flat. They're not responsive. They are literally a series of images that I can't do much with. And so I don't get the benefit of that feeling. Now, you're never going to match the feeling of being there for real, in real life. But you can do things to make it a lot more exciting. And so here's the Montreal Museum of Arts. Let me see if that video will play. Oh, okay. And so this is some of their online content. It's not an online-only exhibition, but it is helping you to navigate that collection online. It's not earth-shattering or groundbreaking in a lot of ways, but it does allow you to see the artifacts up close. It allows you to navigate. It allows you to get a feeling of kind of what's involved in that collection. And I think they do a pretty good job of laying things out and explaining them. Could they do more? Sure they could. I think there's a whole big gap of opportunity there. But I think as a starting point of making it more exciting, I think the museum in Montreal has done a really good job. All right, so measuring success. Many museums are using that traditional mass media, not mass media, I don't know what that is. Mass media, and then measuring the success of those campaigns against tickets sold, right? That's like us putting up a billboard, if your company putting up a billboard and then saying, so we put the billboard up on Friday and we had 100 people walk through the door. I think that's successful. That must have worked, right? There's no way to measure how much impact that billboard had on the ticket sales unless everybody that walks through the door, you're saying, did you see the billboard? Did you see the billboard? Did you see it? You must have seen a billboard, right? We just don't do that, right? So they're still relying on the traditional mass media to affect sales. And so this might work for larger national museums, but what about the smaller ones? What about the modern design museums and the Gardner museums of the world, where the mass media, they may not have the budget for it, or they may not necessarily have the methodologies to compete for people's time? So the Canadian Museums Association released a report in 2016 where they discussed how Canadian museums need to diversify their revenue streams and attract more donations to survive. And what they stressed was one of the barriers for a lot of museums has been their profile, image, and expertise in competing with other organizations for dollars, for people's ticket dollars. And another statistic is that 31% is the amount of revenue that comes from tickets, restaurants, and the store, the museum store, the one that you typically walk through every time you go in like one of those featured exhibits. Who went to the blue whale exhibit at the ROM? Anybody? Yeah, it was cool. But I love how like as soon as you're done, it's like, buy all of these things, buy all. Yeah. And so that was from the Art Museums by the Numbers, sorry. That was the Association of Art Museum Directors. And so 31%, that is not an insignificant number, and the balance of that typically comes from government funding and donations. And so another stat is that exhibits account for 32% of a museum's operating budget. So 32% of their operating budget is to actually put those exhibits on. And so the question that we asked, again, this talk is full of lots of questions, is that what would happen if a museum was able to offset the cost of exhibits while increasing opportunities for revenue? So knowing that it's 31% for tickets, store, and the other thing that I talked about, restaurants, yes. How would you be able to increase that by improving the user experience? Could a better web UX result in less reliance on mass marketing? We think it can. We think that getting people involved and excited at the beginning when they're on their phones or on the website can result in a much higher ratio of people buying tickets and putting their money into that museum. Next, we looked at memberships. The way that we look at it, and the way that I look at it, is memberships are like party invites. You're inviting someone to your party. And so, do you want to go to this one? That is the most embarrassing thing I think somebody could do. Or do you want to go to this one? Right? I mean, it's a party of one, but it's still a pretty awesome party. I'd want to go to that, just to see that kid on that thing with Sparks. And so, like, looking at the ROM website, to me, this is the equivalent of like a single lonely person standing in the middle of a room with a party hat and a bowl of chips. Welcome to our party, I think. There's nothing exciting there at all. It's just like, here's the information, take the information, learn about the stuff. Want to be a member? Sure, There's nothing there that makes me excited about being a member. By contrast, going back to the Montreal Museum, I've used this example a lot because they've done a pretty good job. They have different sort of packages and ways that you can get involved with the museum as a member, and it shows me what my future self could be if I become a member. In this case, I don't know who these people are, but they look happy, they look like they're having fun, and they look like they're important. And so there's a cachet associated with being a member at this particular museum versus, the ROM, which is like, look at this, there's nothing there. So how do we create that feeling time and time again when we're doing membership pages? Now, for some, it's about cost. Like I, again, as a father, a membership makes financial sense. I can buy a membership, I can go 2 times, it pays it for itself. And so we've actually stopped asking for gifts and things for the kids for Christmas or for their birthdays, and we ask for memberships to the AGO or the ROM, or because we get so much more out of it than another massive plastic thing that I don't have space for in my house. So for some, it's an economical decision. But for others, there's that cachet that I talked about involved in being a member, getting the benefits of membership. But if there's no perceived value, then what is the point? Why am I becoming a member in the first place? what do I get? What does it make me? How do I contribute back to that cultural institution in a way that's meaningful? Now, what if cultural institutions were like gyms? Right? Gym advertising, I think, is hilarious. But, what if it was treated like other membership-oriented businesses? Would it be that it could be aspirational or want me? I'm not saying necessarily that this FET, whatever the middle one is, and then FIT is super aspirational, but at least it gives you an understanding of your future self. Here's an example of Equinox Gym. And what they've used is this video on the page to show me what it looks like and feels like and what it is to become a member at this particular gym. And there's no audio, but basically it's like, I'm not going to sing the soundtrack, like Rocky, dun, 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 dun. But it makes you feel like, oh yes, I want to be there. I want to do that. I want to get fit. I want to have a happier life. I want to be awesome. I want to be, that guy. That guy with the muscles, And yeah, anyways, it's like your future self. You're awesome, Equinox. It's a great blood, gym, shred, whatever, But at least they put effort into making me see something different, right? So we think there could be a long way to go in terms of having this kind of aspirational marketing on a cultural institution's website. Next, let's talk about accessibility. Now, how many of you are real advocates for accessibility inside your organizations? I want to see all your hands up, folks. Every single one of your hands should be up. Accessibility is super important. And so a stat that I love to share is that 15% of the world's population is living with a disability, which translates into over 1 billion people. If you're not focused on accessibility, there's a potentially group of 1 billion people that aren't able to access the things that you're creating. That's a huge problem. And so that disability could be a permanent disability. It could be temporary, like a temporary vision loss. I actually have a designer in my team right now who sadly has started to go blind in one eye. And so she's trying to get this situation figured out, but right now she can't see out of her left eye. And so, it kind of brings home the idea that accessibility is incredibly important so that people can experience the things that you are designing for them. And so I'm going to take you back to the definition of what a museum is. By definition, a museum is a building in which objects of historical, scientific, artistic, or cultural interest are stored and exhibited. And so I don't think that it's responsible of us or fair of us to not design in a way that allows everybody to experience that. I think we're doing people a disservice by not paying attention to accessibility. Now, inside the museums, inside places like the Science Center, there's assistive devices, which are wonderful, for audio or visual, or, I think the ROM even has people that will, take your wheelchair and wheel you around the museum and explain the different exhibits to you, which is fabulous. And so the museums do a really great job of doing that physically, but they do a shit job of doing it digitally. And even this Montreal website that I was so hot on a few minutes ago, the contrast on that text is atrocious. There's a good majority of the population that won't be able to read that at all. And so if we're so focused on making a great experience, it should focus on every aspect of what we're creating and designing, not just, motion, or not just color, or not just wowing our audiences with something that's beautiful. It also has to be functional for everybody. And back to our Science Center example, sorry folks. Accessibility is, here as well. A responsive website is that way because it allows for the best possible experience on the medium that you currently have in your hand or on your lap or wherever you are. And so not having a responsive website isn't just a dated methodology, it's an irresponsible one because you're not truly paying attention to accessibility. In Ontario, we have AODA. Who's familiar with AODA? Yes. It's not a new thing, and even in the States they have Section 508, which is the accessibility standard. These aren't new, they've been around for a while. So my message to the Science Center and other places is get your shit together, We have to pay attention to these things, it's important. It's no longer optional, it's something that has to be done. So more burning questions. If a significant portion of the population is having a shitty experience online, what's their expectation of the real thing? If I come to a website and it doesn't give me what I need or doesn't even pay attention to my needs, then I'm going to extrapolate on that and think that by going to the museum, I'm not getting what I need either. And so either I'm going to take a risk and try it anyways, which not a lot of people will do, or I'm just not going to go. And so a lot of revenue, we think, is being missed out on because there's not attention being paid to everybody. So, how do we make it better? Well, we certainly don't have all the, sorry, I totally missed the little time cards. I have like 1 minute left, right? Like 5-ish? Cool. Like I said, we don't have all the answers. You know, I'm not a certified museum designer. I don't know if anybody actually is for the web. I know you guys are. You guys are. But what I do have the ability to do is ask some really interesting and important questions along with my team. And so, if everything is truly a user experience, and we think it is, the museum experience needs to start well before I walk in the door. It needs to start on my phone. It needs to start in all of the communications I have with that cultural institution up until the point that I get there. And then when I get there, it's a continuation of that experience. Now, the great thing about being a user experience and a UI designer is that we get to ask ourselves the questions, what if, right? And I think that's one of the most important questions that you can have in your arsenal as a designer, is to think about all of the possibilities that are out there, regardless of any constraint. And so what if, right? What if a visit to the museum started on your phone? What if I walked by the museum and I, in some sort of augmented reality, that advertising came to life and became something that lived on my device? Now I can interact with the exhibit even before I walk in the door. What if that was a possibility? P.S. it is. Right? What if there was a greater focus on creating and augmenting the real-life experience of our cultural institutions online? What if we could really focus on the medium of the internet, even when I say that, it sounds like, yes, of course, the medium of the internet. It sounds dated even when I talk about it. But there needs to be a greater focus on using that medium to its full advantage. And what if there was a shift in focus from academics to aspirational marketing? Yes, the research is important. Yes, how you got there and how that exhibit came to be is important. But as a user, I need to know how it's going to affect me. What am I going to get out of this experience? And what if there was far less friction in making a purchase decision? Don't take me to PayPal. Don't take me to Eventbrite. Keep me on the page. Make me excited. Let me buy things from your store in a really easy way. So some of the lessons that we learned with this exploration was as follows. One is to consider the entire experience. Again, I've drilled this home a lot in this talk, but the idea that it isn't just about being in the museum. There are so many opportunities outside of that can really make that experience even better and make me want to come back. Focus on content, value, and audience. Board of directors information is valuable to somebody, but not valuable to most people that are visiting the website. So focus on what's important, and then focus on your audience. Who is actually coming to the museum? Why would they be coming to the website? Is it mainly people out of town? Is it mainly people that are looking for activities for the children? Why would they be doing that? Third one is keep me in your court. You've attracted me, I'm on your website, keep me there. Make sure that you keep me excited in the content and then drive me to buy, drive me to that membership, drive me to make that purchase decision. And then lastly, it's an exhibit on you. You spend a lot of time creating these beautiful, wonderful, magical exhibits inside the museum. But if you shift the thinking about an exhibit and treat your website as an exhibit on your museum or on your cultural institution, then I think it can allow for a lot more possibility because it framed the problem a little bit differently. That's it. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think there's like a hot minute for a question. Yeah. Anybody have a question? And no is fine. No? Yes.
What was your favorite museum experience?
Oh, great. So my question was, repeat question for audience. What was my favorite museum experience online and offline? The offline experience, so my wife and I did some traveling a few years ago, and we were in Istanbul. And Istanbul actually has a pretty amazing design museum, and I thought that was really intriguing. They really did a good job of using the entire space to give you a really interesting experience. One of the exhibits had a bunch of typewriters that were all upside down in various sort of levels, and you got to walk through this hall of typewriters, which I thought was really cool. I haven't been to the Infinity Mirrors exhibit, but I've heard it's pretty incredible. In terms of online, based on the ones that we looked at, that Montreal Museum has done a really good job. The Met also does a fantastic job on their website. have a really good understanding of what their exhibits are and how to communicate them to the public. And the design of that website is really great. Any other questions? Yes, up in the corner.
So have you, I guess, presented this to the community?
We haven't yet, no. So we're still in our exploration phase, and what we're going to do is we're in the middle of writing up kind of the blog post, the case study about what we've done. This is actually the first time we're talking about it and the work that we did in public. And so the goal is to have some conversations with these places to help them potentially to improve that experience for everybody. So Science Center folks, drinks tonight, yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Cool. Thanks so much, everyone.